It's Tehachapod time. Key Budge, Greg Garrett, Maya Acosta, Corey Costelloe. Joining us, Congressman Vince Fong.
Good to be here.
It's nice to have you.
Yeah.
And you're not this isn't a first time for you.
No.
But this is the first time in the new studio.
That's right. This is nice.
First time a congressional appearance.
And
This is your
that's
first
right.
congressional appearance.
First Tehachapod as a congressman.
There you go.
Yeah,
We had you as a guest a couple of years ago when you were representing Tehachapi in Kern County as an assemblyman, and now you're in Congress. But we had there were some things that we talked about the street events that you worked on so hard as an assemblyman and making sure that we had safer streets and these street takeovers, and that was one of the hot topics that we talked about. Now you're in federal office. I got to ask you, what's the difference between what you've seen so far being representing Kern County and Tehachapi as a state representative and now in the federal?
Well, it's a whole new level. I mean, I always liken it to it's going from the AAA to the big leagues. And then from, as a new member of Congress, like it's coming in the middle of your senior year. You're the new kid on the block. Everyone did orientation together. Everyone kind of did their like bonding. And so I'm just trying to kind of come in.
You got to make friends now, right?
Exactly. Form those relationships. But the international challenges, when the last 18 weeks, you see what's going on in the Middle East with Iran and Hezbollah, they're attacking Israel. I'm doing meetings with our military when it comes to what's going around the world, our needs to invest in new platforms and improving the quality of life of our military personnel. I mean, those are all like very real. Meeting with my first ambassador I met with, ambassador from Costa Rica. She's telling me about the challenges in Latin America. So, the international component certainly makes it very different. Certainly California, we certainly have a lot of relationships with the fifth largest economy in the world if the state of California was a country. So you get a little bit of that in terms of like international trade, but a whole different ballgame when you go to the federal level.
I love the analogy, AAA to the big leagues.
Well, and so you're cutting your teeth, if you will, at the state level and then to the federal government level. And you've always represented this community well. Tell us your boundaries. What are the boundaries of your district as it sets today?
So this congressional district is massive. It's 4 counties. It goes from Kern to Tulare to Fresno County, and it grabs Kings County as well. So we go from the Kern County LA line, Frazier Park, Bakersfield, Tehachapi, the Kern River Valley. We go up to Porterville, Tulare, Visalia. We go all the way up to Clovis, and then we grab Lemoore as well. So it's a lot of drive time.
So you're representing several hundred or maybe 1 million people.
Close to 800,000 people.
800,000
Wow.
people.
Yeah. And that was all redone with the last congressional sort of redraw of the boundaries, and California lost a seat, which made things interesting. So that district got kind of redone then. So.
Yeah. So, but it's an amazing district. I mean, we have 4 military installations. We have the Fresno Air Wing. We have Lemoore Naval Air Station, China Lake Edwards. So from a military side, we have a lot of men and women that, of course, are supporting our war fighters, oil, agriculture, energy, renewable side. I mean, I think a lot of people forget about this when we have debates about energy. We're 80% of the state's oil and natural gas production, but we're also, as a community, we're 60% of the renewable energy production of the state.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when we talk about energy, we do it all, and I think a lot of your listeners and a lot of people throughout the country don't realize.
I've sat in meetings and conferences with folks in the Bay Area, Santa Clara, talking about they had a community choice energy aggregate that their people were paying for, paying a little more to get renewable. And someone asked the question, well, where are you producing it? And they said, oh, we use Terragen in Tehachapi. Yeah. And they're the ones producing it in their name. And this happens, LADWP bought wind turbines to help power Los Angeles right here outside of Tehachapi. So it happens all over the state with what's happening in East Kern.
There is no energy goal that can be met in California without us.
Yeah. And then you have the hydrogen testing going on and some other exciting projects happening.
There's geothermal
Yep.
as well, hydro. So We do it all. And I think that's one of the great things about our community.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I think translating, California, fifth largest economy in the world, if you will, but going from the state of California to the federal government, I mean, they're intertwined so tightly. As the federal government does well, the state does well, and vice versa. So can we talk a little bit about that and how you're translating that into representing our region?
Well, there's clearly a nexus. So, I said this earlier this morning when we're all meeting about how everyone tries to silo a lot of things. Like, this is a state issue, this is a federal issue. When we talk about transportation, for example, they're all tied together. You look at CARB, for example, they're trying to ask the EPA for waivers so that they can make, they want to mandate that all our trucks go electric. They want to mandate that all our locomotives go electric. Well, that has huge implications to supply chain, right? Now, the modern technology doesn't exist for that to happen. Now, eventually at some point, maybe 20, 30 years down the road, maybe Elon Musk will figure that out. But imagine now, 60% of the trains can't come into California. Right, because there's just no technology that allows them to go.
They can't make it up the grade to Tehachapi.
Exactly. Imagine 50% of our trucks going off the road. Well, for us who orders on Amazon or buys our products at the store, and then, well, where does that come from? It goes into the ports of LA and Long Beach. It's either trucked or railed into a distribution center and then taken to our community. Well, if you don't have the infrastructure, what does that do? You look at the truck climbing lanes that we're trying to get done in Tehachapi. You look at the 99 and the 58 and the 5. There's a federal component and there's a state component. A lot of the resources pass through from the federal government to the state. So it is incumbent on all of us to work collaboratively on the local level with the state and the federal government. And so, because I'm still like relatively tied to the state, and I still have a lot of friends there, I still try to, merge our relationships together to figure out, okay, how can the federal government work closer with the state, and of course working with the city as well.
Yeah, realistic goals are the key in my mind, because if you have unrealistic goals, it always trickles down to the local level. And we're the guys that are boots on the ground that have to, figure these things out. And charging stations, power to our area, if we talk about electric vehicles, so on and so forth. You've got to work collaboratively with each other. And it seems like that, we're always the ones that kind of have to pick up the slack.
Well, power generation is probably the one area where all of us need to work together. If you're going to require certain things, let's say we do. I certainly want more, AI development and us investing in technology and being a hub of technology in the Central Valley. Well, all of these data centers, they require a lot of electricity, a lot of power. So, how does the federal government invest in power generation? How can we streamline the process? We have the NEPA process, the environmental process to get clearance on the federal level. In California, we have CEQA, which that law has been used by lawyers and weaponized to prevent projects from being done. And you guys live it in terms of projects that have been delayed. How can we streamline the process to get these projects completed? Because if they're delayed, time value of money, right? A project that would have cost, $10 million over 10 years becomes like $100 million, and that's just not sustainable.
I remember I just saw recently a story, it made me chuckle, but at the same time it was a little frustrating, there was a capital expansion in Sacramento, and they declared it CEQA exempt to expend. And if we were trying to do anything like that, adding capacity to something, it would have been, they'd have been all on us on CEQA.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's the frustration, I think, that when you talk to the average person, it's like, okay, so what are your priorities as a community, as a state, as a country? Well, we got to build things. Mm-hmm. And so what do we need to build? Well, everyone agrees we got to build wastewater treatment plants, roads, bridges, support our ports. We just got to build factories and manufacturing facilities. Well, what does the state government do? Well, they'll clear like a stadium, or they'll clear this estate building, but they won't do something that will actually set us up for, the future.
I think you dealt with that, on an expansion on Rosedale Highway in Bakersfield, right? They were trying to do CEQA for just a small road expansion. There was already a road there.
Exactly.
And they wanted to do CEQA on a road that was already existing to add about 8 feet of asphalt.
Oh, absolutely. We drive the 58 and the 99, already developed thoroughfares.
Yeah.
The roads exist.
Yeah.
So if we want to talk about road safety, we talk about expanding our capacity to move products and goods up and down the state. We got to expand those needed infrastructure road projects, because that's not only good for our community, but that's good for the country.
You know what we really do well, and not we sitting at this table, but others, the Navy, the Air Force, and NASA. They're developing technologies just to the east of us that are being translated into the private world, right? NASA is all of the technology that they produce, or they create, design, is pushed out. We were talking earlier about this, Vince, the Elon Musk, different companies. All of us are better off because of it. And so how's the federal government helping that whole process along?
Well, it's amazing that when you look at the aerospace innovation and technological development that's happening right here, right here in Tehachapi and Edwards Air Force Base. A lot of people don't realize until it's the front page of the news. Everyone, I think, the world was captivated about with Elon and SpaceX being able to capture a booster in midair. That booster was as large as a skyscraper. And I mean, it was an amazing achievement. A lot of that technology in the engines and the booster rockets that SpaceX uses was done with data and research and development at Edwards Air Force Base,
right in our backyard.
You look at the development of hypersonics that Stratolaunch is doing. All of that is being done in Mojave and in Edwards Air Force Base, and using the airspace heading out to China Lake. Now, hypersonics is like a term that people aren't familiar with, but it's going 5 times the speed of sound. And so, what does that mean for us as an average person? Well, imagine if we could travel that way. Imagine if that NASA Armstrong is testing technology where can they minimize the sonic booms of going hypersonic to where it's just a car door slamming.
Yeah.
Well, then we can go across. We could bring back the Concorde and go across the country, across the world.
Is it LA to London in like a little over an hour?
Exactly.
I mean,
that would transform. That would transform the way that we travel. Imagine, traveling with your family, a little kid, and all of a sudden, instead of 5 hours on the plane, it's like 1 hour. But the commercial space development that's being done. When I talked to Dick Rutan, the legend, when he was alive, I mean, he was saying if we went into space, all of us could go into space, but we could land anywhere around the world. Mm-hmm. And so imagine us flying out of Mojave, landing in Paris for lunch, and coming back the same day. Yeah. I mean, that would be amazing.
Have a croissant?
I tell it to my kids all the time. I mean, especially I let them know. I mean, it's something that my parents kind of thought, but now the technology took a while to catch up. But I let them know. I said, hey, when you guys are my age, space travel for you will be a no big deal. They'll be doing that. They'll be able to use the curvature of the Earth, go into just enter the lower parts of outer space and land. I mean, that kind of stuff. It's going to be the norm because of the testing going on just outside of our
and all of that's being done right here.
Yeah.
Rapidly.
All of it's being done right here. I mean, we have the best and brightest around here. And so that's the exciting thing too, is we're on the cutting edge. We're the hidden gem when it comes to those things. But there's commercial applications. There's certainly military applications that they're developing. There's a lot of challenges around the world, and so we need to be staying on top of that. We talked about the development of space and our satellite technology that SpaceX and a lot of our commercial partners are doing. All of that's being done right here. Blue Origin, I think, is testing one of their new engines out at Edwards. I mean, if you want to study aerospace, I mean, you don't have to go anywhere else but right here.
And even the counter to that too. I mean, just some of the companies we have in Tehachapi with Kratos and Sierra Technical, stealth has obviously been around for a while, but other folks in the world have stealth technologies. Well, we do as well, but then we also need to figure out how do we target their stealth technologies. So we have companies that develop these drones that they're just kind of they're dummies to be shot at, and they're trying to develop how they can pick them up on radar and use them for weapon systems. So there's a big defense component in all that as well.
There's AI components now. I think the Secretary of the Air Force was just at Edwards a number of months ago, flying the first AI platform for the Air Force. The pilot now is the quarterback. And so, you got the pilot and the F-35, and then there's he or she is coordinating, a number of unmanned vehicles. Now, all of those things are necessary because we have a lot of threats around the world, and that's probably the understatement of the morning is that you just open the newspaper and what's happening with threat of China, and you look what's going on in the Middle East, you look what's going on in the Ukraine. We're in an unsafe world, and our military is going to be the ones that are going to have to ensure that our country is protected.
Yeah. Some of the new tech is crazy. I can't remember the NASA, their hypersonic, the X-59. I might get that wrong. There's some NASA folks screaming at me right now, but there's no front windshield. Like, we're thinking of, you think of a jet, you think of the canopy and you can see around. There isn't one because they don't need it. There's some cameras, but like you said, like a quarterback, all the data is right there in front of them and they're gauging everything. And it's not so much seeing anymore as it is getting the data into, the different sensors and cameras they do have, but there's no front view out for the pilot.
But with all that technology, you're going to need more data. I mean, that's the investment now we have to make as a community, right? In terms of like broadband, in terms of like, our basic infrastructure that we need to operate. I mean, every business now is not just a website anymore. It's like the amount of data they've got to collect to communicate with their customers. But then you look at what's going on with the hurricanes that have impacted the East Coast, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. They are now cut off from the world, and so now like Starlink is now connecting, bringing they're now being utilized to get people services and get reconnected. I mean, those are all things now that we take for granted until we really need it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic because you read my mind. I was going to bring this up a second ago, but the technology is not just keeping us, not defending the United States, but it's keeping the world free. And so these technologies, Starlink and all these other things that are happening in and around us, we don't want to take them for granted, and we want to protect those industries, and we want to nurture them so that they continue to kind of harden those industries.
Yeah. And one of the first bills I introduced was actually in the AI technology space. Is like, okay, we want to develop all this technology, but we need a workforce. I want our kids, our students, to be on the cutting edge to develop all of these technologies. So why don't we create centers of excellences in community colleges throughout the country, and so that our students can go and learn about AI, can learn about quantum, can learn about all these new technologies, and then they now have the knowledge and the skills to do that right here. They don't need to go to Silicon Valley. They don't need to go down to they don't have to leave our community. They can stay right here.
And it's not just about the technology or tomorrow, but you're on a committee for infrastructure at the federal government too, because we need to take care of our streets and roads and our highways and airports and our aqueducts and all those sorts of things. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So the two committees that I specifically requested to be on when I got elected to Congress was the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. Transportation infrastructure is pretty self-explanatory, but it's critically important when it comes to just our daily lives. We drive on our roads, and we fly out of our airports, our goods and products. I'm very, very passionate about our supply chain, just because we've lived through the supply chain crisis during the pandemic, and I never want to go through that again in terms of that. And I believe that issue or the challenges of our supply chain, it doesn't get a lot of attention, but we understand it because we're a logistics hub community. We understand that goods and products go up and down the 58, they go up and down the 5 and 99, and so that's critically important. So, but a lot of times we just we have so much deferred maintenance when it comes. And as a city, you guys know this. Maintaining your local roads, we have the same challenges on the state and federal level, and we need to make sure that we maintain the infrastructure that we need.
I would say maintaining, that's something, as soon as you mentioned that, I started thinking about our philosophy here at the city. Mm-hmm. And when we look at our infrastructure and maintaining what the taxpayer is invested into, it's such a critical thing that is easily escaped.
Yeah. Well, it's also planning for the future. And I said, and you guys are definitely, as a city, have been very, very forward thinking. But we are, as a region, we're going to continue to grow. We're still the most affordable place in California. And so while you read all the headlines that Californians are leaving the state, which is true and unfortunate, we got to figure out how to bring them back, is that our region, though, is going to be squeezed on three sides. The LA region is going to move up, the Bay Area is moving in, the Central Coast is moving in because they want what we offer. They want the way of life here in Tehachapi and what you guys offer. And so if every city in the Central Valley is going to potentially double in population in the next 25, 30 years, like what does that require? Parks, roads, schools, safe communities, investing in our law enforcement, all the hospitals, healthcare, medical facilities,
all the spokes of the wheel.
Exactly. And so, and we don't have the luxury of like fixing those things or investing those things 25 years from now. We have to make those investments now so that we are prepared for that when it happens.
And the city of Tehachapi, we understand that completely, and we understand our role. If you don't have a safe city, a great fire department, a great police department, if you don't maintain your infrastructure, then the people that we've been talking about, the industries, the technology, they'll find somewhere else to go because they bring their families here. They want good schools. They want health care. They want recreation. They want the curbs and gutters to be clean. They want to, if somebody calls 911, they want somebody to come running, right? And so we understand our role very, very well. We've invested millions of dollars in the last 2 years in just that, putting our money where our mouth is, because it matters.
Exactly. One area they need water. And I mean, that's been a big point of contention and fight for us in our region. But, we get a bit of water storage too. Wastewater treatment plants, not a sexy topic, but, when you flush a toilet, it's got to work.
Yeah, it's got to go away.
And even too, I mean, outside of just our city limits, there's been some projects recently where, to your point about planning, we looked at, the 58 climbing lanes. They're not in the city limits, but obviously our residents are traveling on 58, especially coming east, and they're dealing with that. But even from a trade perspective, as you pointed out, I mean, I remember having a conversation with one of your predecessors years ago, Bill Thomas, after getting all that money to extend 58 to 99, he said, the last thing I want to do is have trade come to a halt in Tehachapi because the trucks are backed up. So, pushing for climbing lanes, and even Highway 202 outside of the city limits, there's an expansion project in a couple of years. Jay, our development services director and engineer, he put pencil to paper and basically designed it for Caltrans. Is that here? This is because we have so many folks, whether they're going to the prison, coming in and out of the city limits, and that there's a safety issue there, and really took a lead on a project, again, outside of the city limits, but knowing it speaks to the entire region and the health of the infrastructure in the entire region. It's important to interject once in a while.
Yes. Designed it on the back of a napkin.
Yeah, no, he literally did. He was like, hey, check this out. And then,
but Kern Cog, Aaron Akimi, Caltrans District 9, headquartered up in Bishop, they all work really well with the city of Tehachapi, and we're all on the same page. And so we didn't used to be that way, but we're very appreciative of their partnership and putting the funds where they're needed so that the people can travel, right? You need to be able to get things to market or get to school or get to, wherever. Fill in the blank.
Now, road safety is an area that I've certainly been working on because, a lot of times people, when they think of a rural road, it's like, okay, well, it's somewhere that's further removed, but now you've got more and more growth. But the other thing too is that you're more likely to get injured and on a rural road than you are on an urban road because it takes longer for someone to respond to you. And so we need to make sure that we have, if we're serious about road safety, we got to start investing in rural roads too, just as much as we do urban roads.
That's right.
Nice.
So true. I was over the weekend, the wife and I were heading out to the Tejon area, and we went through the back roads through Arvin out there, and it was like a kind of a whack-a-mole. You're just back and forth, left and right, dodging the potholes out there in that ag area. But you're right. You get out in the rural areas, and some of those roads are.
And everyone uses their phone app, their apps, their maps, and their maps are going to take
shortcuts
to the rural roads, and then you're going to get more damage on those roads too. And so we have to now do. When we talk about maintenance and upkeep and just adequate expansion, we got to do all those things.
But the traffic is a reflection of the economic growth, the prosperity, that we all need. I mean, you have to have the dollar changing hands, and this is a good problem to have, but we haven't been good in planning locally and at the state level, keeping ahead of the needs, the streets and roads needs.
Yeah. Well, it's fundamental. I mean, when you talk about the local business climate, I mean, road infrastructure, transportation infrastructure is a critical piece. It's probably it's the foundation of it.
Yeah. What about on infrastructure? How much you touch on with power? Recently there was a big push through the B3K initiative to really get some aerospace defense hub stuff going in Mojave. They already have one kind of there, but to formalize it. And I was at a meeting and they were talking about opportunities, and I said, hey, I'm not trying to poo-poo this, but a challenge is going to be power. East of Tehachapi, it's problematic on grid space. And if you're trying to add in this advanced manufacturing that takes a lot of power, AI takes a lot of power, how are we going to do that? So have electrical grids and that sort of thing come up in any of the infrastructure stuff?
It's the essential part for the expansion. So if we talk about water, we talk about roads, and then we talk about power, because you got to keep the lights on. Mm-hmm. You just can't. How do you generate enough power to keep the economy going? And so we have to build more transmission lines. We need to generate more power. That's, I think, like the crux of it. Like the frustration I have nowadays when we talk about the debate about energy is that everyone wants to argue about like what type of energy is better than the other. Mm-hmm. But we don't. I think that debate is misplaced. We need all of it.
Yeah.
And we need to create as much power as possible so that everyone can utilize it. That's how you bring the costs down, and at the same time facilitate economic growth. And so, if we're going to attract, AI facilities, if we're going to attract advanced manufacturing, then you have to build more transmission lines. Intel just built a brand new chip factory. Silicon chips, not potato chips, silicon chips in Ohio. And why did they choose Ohio over California? They simply said, Ohio gives us everything we want. It gives us land, it gives us power, it gives us water, it gives us a workforce. So for us, if we're going to position ourselves for the future, water, power, workforce, and land, and I think that's that the energy. I think the state of California is being a little short-sighted when it comes to energy, because they want to focus on one type of power over another.
Energy is the base of an economic, engine. If you don't have energy, you don't have an economic engine.
The last major transmission line I think that was built was here in Tehachapi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and of course that improved our region significantly. But when we talk about the last 6 years, right? It's like, wait, we were going to close the nuclear power plant in on the Central Coast. Realized that was 18% of our base load of electricity.
We delayed that one,
and then all of a sudden, the governor says, "Well, no, we better keep that open, right?" Because just think about it. Just think if that power plant closed in the way it was expected to close. 18% of our supply of the state of California would have gone away.
Yeah.
We would have basically have flipped off our lights at 6:00 at night, and no power we wouldn't have any power.
And nuclear gets a terrible rap too, because people talk about nuclear waste. I think I read where all the nuclear waste ever right now generated in the nuclear power plants in the United States can fit on a single football field. That's it. That's all that's out there. It's not like it's generating a football field a day of waste. That waste is limited, and that's about the scale of it.
Our Navy powers our entire fleet, a lot of it with nuclear. But that's the thing, is you need all of it. Mm-hmm. You need nuclear, you need wind, you need solar, you need geothermal, you need hydro, you need oil and natural gas. Yeah. And if we had all of those things going on and we allowed all of that development, not only would we have enough power for the entire state and for our growth, but our electricity bills would go down. There's one of the biggest frustrations I hear as I travel throughout our community. Well, there's three. It's electricity bills, it's gas prices, and it's food costs, right? Well, the state of California, unfortunately, has required all the utilities to buy very expensive energy, instead of allowing them to go out into the market and buy and get the cheapest production. And so that's why you see the utility rates going up. We have gas prices are going up because we don't have enough supply. There's a big debate going on in Sacramento right now about requiring handicapping our refineries. Well, we went from 40 refineries that made gasoline in the state of California in the 1980s down to less than 10. We have less than 10 refineries in California that make gasoline for our state. And then that's going to go down even further because of just how difficult it is to stay in business in California. Well, if you have 6 refineries in California making gasoline, well, that's not a good situation when you said 40.
I think that's a security threat also.
It's a huge,
You think about, Korea, China. I mean, let's be honest. These guys know where our infrastructure lies. And if you're going to hit somebody, I mean, I don't want to be the doomsday guy, but certainly, more is better and spread out, because then you transport things shorter distances, instead of long distance. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
First thing we do when you fight a war is you cut off supply lines, right?
Right. Yeah, that's how you win.
There's this big debate. If you step, if we all step back, 30,000 feet and say, okay, well, our biggest fights we have now as a state and a country, when it comes to policy, is abundance versus scarcity. Okay, we need more water, we need more power, we need more workforce, we need everything else. So why are we making things so difficult for people to go back to work, produce more water, produce more power? We should be focusing on how do we generate more of what we need instead of trying to handicap our production of all our necessities.
You look worldwide, every country, they take advantage of the resources they have. You can go to, Iceland uses a lot of geothermal because they have it, right? They're sitting on a giant volcano and roads are heated that way, power is generated that way. They take advantage of that. We have a lot of that, if not all of it, in Kern County alone, let alone the state of California, let alone the nation. But Kern County alone has a lot of those resources. And, it is crazy when some of that oil is being imported from Costa Rica, and black market stuff and all kinds of things are happening, and ships are idling out of the port to deliver oil and contributing to the environment, when honestly, if it was just refined in Bakersfield, it would be a lot cleaner.
We have it all around us. We have wind production right here outside of Tehachapi. We have geothermal in Ridgecrest. We're blessed with solar in the desert. We have oil and natural gas reserves in the west side of Kern, off the Kern River region, the oil field out there outside of Bakersfield. I mean, we have it all here.
Yeah.
So why are we not allowing us as a community? Let us lead the way, but by limiting our ability to produce, we are now relying on importing that electricity and energy from countries that don't like us or from other states.
So the state of California is kind of handcuffing us as a congressman, a federal congressman. How do you translate that information into the federal level so that the feds can help us manage our own affairs?
Well, on the federal side, we certainly are trying to expand energy production on a national scale, and I think that's important. Streamlining the infrastructure when it comes to pipelines, when it comes to electricity production, when it comes to energy projects in general. The current administration, the Biden-Harris administration, I mean, they were going to end liquid and natural gas export, which, look, they had I didn't agree with their reason, and the courts agreed with us and they undid it. But here's the thing: this is the scary thing when it comes to national security. We had the ability to export our LNG to other countries. Well, when the Biden-Harris administration limited it, where was other countries buying their liquid natural gas?
People that didn't like us.
They bought it from Russia. Mm-hmm. So you were forcing countries then. They were going to fund the fight against Ukraine, because if they weren't buying our liquid natural gas, they were buying Russian natural gas. Yeah. I mean, that's how it's all interconnected. But then we obviously need to leverage our ability to pressure and persuade and tell the Newsom administration, hey, look, California, we have the ability to produce energy as well. So let's not handcuff ourselves. If California wants to stay prosperous, and we need power, let us do it. This refinery mandate, when it comes to limiting the reserves, now it's gotten attention nationally, because not only are they concerned about California, but California's mismanaged energy policies is now going to impact Nevada and Arizona. So, this refinery mandate says, okay, every refinery now has to withhold needed gasoline supplies for a reserve. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's gasoline that we need as motorists and as Californians. But come to find out, as you looked at the energy supply of the Western United States, 80% of the gasoline that goes into Nevada and Arizona comes from where? Comes from California. Mm-hmm. So not only is Sacramento now going to mess up the California energy market, it's going to mess up the gasoline supply in 2 other states. And both governors, on a bipartisan basis, sent a letter to the governor that says, hey, maybe you should rethink what you're doing, because now you're going to disrupt the energy market across the Western United States, and that's going to be bad for all of us.
Little known details. Known details.
Some of those committee members, I think, heard that. I think some of that, the talk around those special hearings are, even the committee's like, yeah, this is kind of bigger than just we need gas on hand to make the price lower. This has got a huge ramifications nationally.
And we're trying to streamline the process to build those facilities. And this is one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, even within California, is that California is an energy island. So just because other states expand or their energy production, especially when it comes to oil and natural gas, it doesn't mean that it can be shipped or transported into California because of transportation costs and because of the lack of pipeline infrastructure. So we have to do it ourselves, and that's what for us in Kern County, that's what we're good at. We're good at producing oil and natural gas. Let us do it, and then let the renewable side supplement everything else. I challenge everyone to go to the Cal ISO website. Right now, I would probably bet that close to half of our electricity production that keeps our lights on is probably renewable. But then go at 8 p.m. Check the Cal ISO website at 8 p.m. tonight and tell me what is generating our electricity. Mm-hmm. It isn't the renewable side. It's not the sun and the wind. It's actually, the more traditional sources of like natural gas and we're importing a lot of that electricity from other states who also are using natural gas.
Mm-hmm. And, we talk about infrastructure, water also. So the state water project, I know Tehachapi Cummings County Water District, they do a fine job, working with the state of California, but the federal government controls a lot of that water also. So it's not just state water, but it's federal snowpack, if you will, that translates into water into the California aqueduct. So I know that your predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, was working on establishing a way to make, raise dams or different things, a lot of different elements. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So there's 2 water systems in California. There's a federal water system and there's a state system. If the federal government decides to move more water through to the federal system, the Central Valley Project, that's a good thing. I mean, that means more water from that system. Now, 4 years ago, President Trump actually did that, approved new biological opinions, which is basically new science and new data that said, hey, we have the ability to move more water to the Central Valley Project.
We were there when he signed it. Remember, that was when he was in Meadows Field. He signed it in Meadows Field.
It was right here in Kern County. Mm-hmm. Well, so at that point, the state of California had a choice. The Governor Newsom and his administration had a choice of, should we conform with the new science or should we not? And of course, if they conformed with the new science, we would have moved more water to the state project, which our community gets a lot of most of our water.
The new science, because we're smarter, right?
Yeah.
We have technologies.
New modeling,
right?
New data that says, hey, maybe we don't need to push as much water into the ocean to maintain our species. We actually could do both. And of course, the scientists that did it were not political. They worked for all types of administrations, from Obama to Bush, right? So it was interesting how that whole debate got politicized. But all that being said, the Newsom administration decided not to conform with the new science. They decided, well, we're going to litigate, we're going to sue, and we're going to pull back our water through the State Water Project. Well, what did that mean? Well, there wasn't any new water. So the federal government moved more water, but the state pulled back. And that was not good for our community. And so we now on the federal level are trying to ensure that we get back to the updated science, that was undone, but also try to get the city of California to conform with that new science as well. And I think a lot of listeners are probably going to find out that one of the biggest fights we have coming into the end of the year in December is that the Biden-Harris administration is trying to add new species to the biological opinions that were signed by President Trump. What does that mean? It means that if we have new species that we have to evaluate, that's less water.
And new studies
and everything, and it's going to delay this process. And I think that there's a bipartisan consensus that we shouldn't do this. So it's not just me saying as someone like that with my own personal opinion. We have bipartisan concerns now that says, wait, that's less water up and down the city of California.
Yeah, it seems like it would be better off. We'd all be better off if we worked together rather than spending billions of dollars on attorneys.
Yeah, exactly.
It's taxpayer dollars.
and studies.
especially when the science has to be updated. I mean, we should not be using data and science that was from the 1970s when we have data in the 2020s that says, okay, like, that's actually been the frustration with a lot of things. When you talk about like wildfires, when you talk about water, and when you talk about like natural resource policy, is that we have all these new technologies that allow us to like better manage our forests, we better manage our precious resources. But because there are some very, very extreme special interest groups that are engaged, they prevent all of those new science that
we're embracing some technologies and others we're ignoring.
Exactly. Because it makes no sense.
We were in a meeting a little bit earlier today that you joined us, and there was a question that came from one of the members of the audience, and they were talking about the forest management and the impacts that has. And you mentioned something in there that 70% of California is federal.
Of the forests in California, over close to 70% is federal forests, and then the rest is state.
And then the impacts that forest management and the carbon footprint, the expansion of my mind continued because you think so narrowly. And then all of a sudden how it trickled into the insurance market and all of us individually, even though we don't live in the middle of the Sequoia National Forest, there's impacts.
We're all impacted. I mean, look, we just went through the Burrell Fire, the largest wildfire we've had in Kern County now to hit in our history. You look at what all the fires have occurred now this year. I mean, on top of course the last, if you look at the last 6 to 8 years, I mean, we've had probably 6 of the largest wildfires in our state's history in the last 6 years. That's billions of dollars of losses that have impacted not only Californians, not only when it comes to carbon in the air, which is probably the equivalent of hundreds of millions of cars on the road. So if we're really serious about reducing carbon, well, we probably should manage our forests better and remove the dead and dying trees out of the forest to minimize the fuel that is causing these wildfires. But then it ties into the insurance market, and as someone who's struggling to get homeowners insurance right now, and it's me along with hundreds of millions or the millions of Californians who also are in this situation. You have insurance companies in California who like State Farm, Farmers. They now are absorbing these costs of these wildfires. And so now it's creating instability in the insurance market. And so all of those costs have to be factored in. Now, you would think that with modeling and with reinsurance that we should allow the insurance companies to use the most updated science to stabilize the insurance market so that they can offer more policies. But the insurance commissioner, unfortunately, doesn't want to allow those things and has prevented them. I think he's been forced to do so. But, imagine you're a small business and now you're forced to absorb $100 million of costs. Well, how do you stay in business? And that's the same dynamic that's happening in the insurance market. You have all the major insurers that now have to endure hundreds of billions of dollars of costs and factor it in to stay afloat and to provide insurance. Now, it's very likely that all of us are going to have to roll into the FAIR plan, which is probably not the best type of insurance. And so now you have adverse selection. So if you study insurance economics, you've now moved a number of policies into one one policy. Well, who capitalizes the FAIR plan with needed capital? Well, it's the same insurers that we need to stay in business. So it's a double whammy, and that's why you have the instability right now in the insurance market, all tied to the wildfire risk that's now occurring. And if the more wildfires that exist, the more those costs have to be absorbed by, the insurance.
So forests continue to burn. Carbon continues to be produced, and the costs are being borne by the taxpayer.
Yeah, so we would be better off to stabilize the insurance market by allowing them to do a reinsurance, but also to manage the forest. If we manage the forest properly and we're able to remove the fuel and minimize that risk, that's one of the biggest ways that we can stabilize insurance. Mm-hmm.
And I was on a tour. SCE provided a tour several weeks ago up in the Shaver Lake area. And so SCE actually owns it's a private forest around Shaver Lake. And I don't know if it was state or federal around it, but the state and federal forests burned to the ground. SCE's forest did not burn because they manage it really well. And that's a little known fact, right? It's a private forest and they manage it appropriately.
One of the most impactful meetings I did, so James Gallagher, who's an assembly member, represents the Yuba City area. He also represents Paradise. And we all remember the tragedy of the Paradise fire. He took me to Paradise a number of years after the fire. And we met a number of community leaders at a school that survived, that was completely preserved and saved. And around that school was properly managed. Mm-hmm. But then the entire town was decimated because the rest of the town wasn't properly managed. The forest around the rest of the town wasn't. And it was like the most stark reminder of like a school that was saved and the rest of the community completely destroyed because one area was managed properly with their forest and the other area was not.
Education is key.
Yeah. And it's crazy too. I mean, you live in Bakersfield. You're having trouble getting homeowners insurance in Metro Bakersfield. You're not even in a wildfire area. You're not even in some of the surrounding communities in Tehachapi. It's crazy to see that trickle down.
The entire state now is, the entire state has been impacted by the wildfire risk. I mean, if you live in Tehachapi, Kern River Valley, Fraser Park, I've talked to hundreds of constituents over the past few months who are dealing with cancellations, and this is a real crisis. Yeah. And I think this is, if we can't get this stabilized, it's going to bleed over to car insurance and everything else. This is one of the areas I think that isn't getting enough attention.
I've heard homeowners who have their mortgage paid off saying, I'm just going to cancel my plan. I don't need it anymore technically because I don't have a mortgage. And so therefore my home is paid off. I'm going to risk it because I can't afford to keep, especially if they're retired and they've paid their home off after all these years, a 30-year mortgage, they're retired and then their rates are going up and they're saying, you know what, I'll just risk not having homeowners coverage.
We're helping constituents right now in the Kern River Valley impacted by the Burrell fire because they weren't insured. Yeah. They had their homeowners insurance canceled and then the Burrell fire happened. Yeah. And so we're dealing with that. And then we dealt with the floods of a couple of years ago. A lot of folks couldn't afford that insurance there either. Yeah. And so if the insurance market doesn't stabilize, like at the end of the day, there's going to be just more risk for everybody else.
It's a ripple effect. I won't say who I have homeowners insurance with, but my policy over the weekend, I got my bill in the mail from $3,000 to $6,900 for the year. Yeah. And these poor people with the hurricane and FEMA and all that's going on there. I mean, remember the hurricane that came up the Pacific? What was the name of it? Hillary came into Tehachapi last year. We had some damage in the city of Tehachapi. We are still waiting on FEMA. We've provided everything, and it's been 14 months.
It's a tiny bit of money too.
Good thing we don't need the money.
So this is
right. Those poor people in the Carolinas and others. Oh my God, something needs to change.
We're dealing with this right now.
Unbelievable.
Before our session ended, we passed a bill to give FEMA $20 billion. So FEMA has $20 billion to deal with disasters. In part was to deal with the hurricanes that were coming, but it was also to deal with the reimbursements of wildfires, droughts, and hurricanes from the past. And so, we are now getting, I've been talking to a couple of members of Congress in the North Carolina area and the Georgia area. They're doing their assessments right now, just like we did for our earthquake challenges and our wildfires. All of that is being accumulated. And then when we go back in November, I think we're going to get a proper assessment. We're still looking at trying to figure out what the cost is to rebuild the Baltimore Bridge.
Yeah.
that collapsed. I mean, so we have a lot of
The backlog's
disasters that they're dealing with. In my personal opinion, right now, FEMA has just not stepped up. Yeah. And that's that may be the understatement of this morning. FEMA just has not adequately responded to the disasters that have affected not only the East Coast and the Gulf Coast right now, but for the past 4 years. I mean, our community, and I think I was just up in Tulare, and they're still fighting for reimbursements from 2017.
Yeah. I think Ridgecrest just got the earthquake money, last year after 2019? It was a 2019 earthquake, and they just finally closed out. I mean, and there's so many silos. You talk about that in the past, but FEMA's got so many silos. So with our minimal damage, we said, we want to, we got to repair this and this. We really like to improve this crossing here just so the water goes under and not over the road. Oh, that's a different pot of funding. You got to wait for a different set of grants to come out to fix that when we could fix it so it doesn't break again.
And exactly, we dealt with this situation with a road in outside of Lake Isabella, where they were being told, the county was being told, well, we can only build the road back to where it was. Yeah. Well, but the road has been washed out like 3 times.
That's the bridge on the east side.
So why not fix it permanently?
Yes, let's do that now,
so that we don't have to do this again.
Common sense doesn't ring true in certain deep bureaucratic agencies.
We thought it would be a good exercise to, hey, we had some damage from the hurricane. Let's go through this process so when, God forbid, we have an earthquake or something, we're more. And I think that we've probably spent more money trying to get the money back that we, to make the repairs because of the FEMA process. And it was, the good news is, I guess, when it really does hit the fan, we might be prepared to know what exactly we need to do, but we're still going to be dealing with those silos.
We are starting to think this through. If there's whoever, we expect, assuming there's an administration that I want in January, putting in the right people so that we can begin to have some forward-thinking people. I know it's just crazy to me that we have a lot of risk-averse individuals in the federal government that can't think this through and say, wait, why not just fix the problem permanently so that we don't have to deal with this again?
Yeah, and they're going to audit it in the future too. I think they're trying to audit on the front end to make sure that you're going to spend this exactly the way, when meanwhile they're going to follow up down the road to make sure you did it appropriately. And there's a level of trust there for sure. And there is some historical cases where local governments haven't done it appropriately, but then you're on the hook to pay that back. But I think they try to audit from the very beginning to make sure you're following exact steps, and that delays the process.
But we got to streamline the process. And that's, I think, an area that a number of us who've lived through the last, at least for us in California, lived through the wildfires and the droughts, is that there's a lot of folks that were hurt during the flooding, but they were absorbing costs that weren't deemed reimbursable, right? We had dairy farmers that were moving dairy cattle like around their community because their farms are going to be flooded. Mm-hmm. Well, what do you got to do to move a thousand dairy cows, right? You got to rent trailers and everything else. Well,
and then you can't milk them if they're not.
You can't milk them, and then all of a sudden, that's not reimbursable.
Yeah,
like you had to respond to a crisis. Water was flowing to your farms, and it was going to decimate everything. And but we can't take care of that.
Yeah, Yeah.
Well, we've covered a lot of topics, Congressman and Key and Corey. Anything that we have not talked about that we might want to touch on?
I think the rails, we talked about it in the last meeting, but I think that we, and Greg, under your leadership, you put together a community-wide notification request to you, Congressman Fong, regarding rail safety and communication.
Well, so this has been something that we're working on now with your leadership about, Greg, in terms of how we better notify the community when there's derailments. We saw a tragic one in East Palestine that happened, and that has now raised the attention. Like, okay, if there's a derailment, which no one wants. But how do we properly communicate with law enforcement? How do we properly communicate with city and county officials to ensure that everyone gets the information happening in real time? And I think that now it's gotten to the level where the Federal Rail Administrator is now working with us and say, how can we develop a better process?
Little known fact, 14, 15, 16 derailments have happened over the last 12 to 18 months between the city of Tehachapi and Caliente. Now, none of them have been to the threat level of, let's say, a chlorine tank or petroleum or something like that, but it will happen. And when it does happen, wouldn't it be nice if Kern County Fire, Tehachapi Police Department, Kern County Sheriff were alerted? Because the wind blows up the canyon and that cloud of whatever is going to drift this way. And we need to be prepared.
And even going back to your infrastructure
it's
comments
just that
too.
simple.
I mean, when I dove into those numbers on the federal where the derailments occurred, there's certain mile markers between Keene and Tehachapi, which are just treacherous for loads. And we've all seen the rail. It's twisting and turning everywhere. And it just seems like, well, couldn't we fix those mile marker issues? I mean, we're carrying more freight on the lines than ever. We're double stacking containers and that sort of thing because we're moving a lot of goods, which is great. But is there not a way to even fix some of those problem areas where you're seeing that these are regularly being derailed?
Maybe FEMA could help us out with that.
Well, the proper communication is important. I know a lot of the railroad operators. I mean, they're investing a lot when it comes to roads to rail safety. We just want to make sure there's proper communication because at the end of the day, as our economy grows, as our community prospers, right, we're going to have more goods and services moving around. I mean, when we talk about like the port strike that happened on the East Coast, and I mean the volume of goods and products is just going to continue to increase, and that's just the reality of the world that we live in. And just we just buy stuff on Amazon now. I mean, it's just and we go to our stores and we have them delivered there. And so as as economic activity moves around, the majority of our goods and products are going to go through rail. So we just need to make sure that not only do we want the railroad operators to invest in rail safety, if there anything that were to happen, we'll make sure that everyone is properly notified.
That's it. It's communication. Right now, just for the listeners' sake, when a train derails, they're not required to call any Kern County officials. They call the State of California OES, Office of Emergency Services, and they're the ones that figure out whether they need to call somebody or not. But that it's time consuming, right? Time is of the essence, should it be a significant problem.
Especially when the first individuals that's going to respond are going to be the ones from our community.
That's right.
Yeah. Or notifying the locals that there's a dangerous issue and that sort of thing, which was a failure in East Palestine. That was one of the big failures, and that derailment was just.
And I think we can be a little better at communicating with each other. That's the point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I know we've grabbed a lot of your time.
We've covered a lot.
But I do have one more question I got to know, because I do know Congressman Fong and his wife from the pickleball world. Are you getting a chance to play in D.C. at all?
So we have played. I still cannot defeat my wife when it comes to pickleball. She is too good.
She is very good.
She is too good. But we are looking for. We've tried a couple of pickleball places, but we're still looking for one. Though I did tell her about the pickleball courts here next to the police station. So we are going to have to come up here and play. But I need more time to practice, and right now I'm not getting a lot of time.
We'll get you out there.
Absolutely. Well, so in closing, any other questions from?
I'm just very excited that you're hitting the ground running, and we'll continue to do so and keep it up. We're very proud of your efforts.
Well,
Thank you for representing us.
I've always enjoyed working with you all, and look forward to continuing.
You gave me some instant street cred, by the way, when we were running the Bakersfield Marathon, because I saw you in your neighborhood and went over and chatted with you for a second, and I was running with my cousin from down south. He goes, "Who's that?" I said, well, it's going to be my congressman here in about a month. So I got instant street cred right away.
So you weren't running to win.
I was carrying him along most of the time. He slowed me down, but yeah, definitely I don't win.
I'm impressed. Corey's run so many marathons and half marathons. I think I've done 3 half marathons, and I've retired because my knees have given out.
Yeah.
But you keep going.
I had to take a long break though. I'm getting back into it. I had to take a break. That Bakersfield one hurt me.
He's playing pickleball now.
I'm playing a lot of pickleball, which is having its own wear and tear effects, thanks to Key.
I'll see you in the pickleball.
There you go.
Well, Congressman Fong, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that It's hard between all the travel, all the different commitments. Your district is huge, but the fact that you acknowledge us here in Tehachapi, you represent us well. We just appreciate it.
Well, this is a great community. It's a model community for other communities as well. So, one of the best run cities probably in America, and I appreciate the work that you do.
Well, that's a giant compliment. Thank you for
Very
that.
nice.
But we appreciate working with you.
We're
Thank
going to
you.
quote you on that for sure.
Very good.
All right, folks, we appreciate the time you spend with us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation today with Congressman Vince Fong, representing the 20th Congressional District here in California. We covered a lot of ground, so we, again, thank you for the time. If you've got a question based on today's conversation, please send it to us at media@TehachapiCityHall.com. We'll get back to you, or we'll forward it off to Congressman Fong's team, or we will get that response back to you. Thank you for your time, and we'll catch you again soon right here on Tehachapod.